I desensitized myself to it. I
Hey guys, my name is Rachel and welcome to episode number 5 in our Psychology of a Killer series. In yesterday's episode, we talked about one of the most deranged killers of all time, Albert Fish. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the story of another sick and twisted serial killer. Now, in order to do this entire story justice, I decided to make this into a 2-part video. So episode number 5 is going to be part 1, and then episode number 6 is going to be part 2. There is literally just so much information to go over that I really can't fit it into one video because it would just be ridiculously long. So with that being said, today we're going to be discussing the heinous crimes of John Wayne Gacy and his background that led him to become the murderer that we know him to be today. John Wayne Gacy was born March 17th, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. His parents were Polish and Danish immigrants, John Stanley Gacy and Marion Elaine Robinson, and he was the middle child of 2 sisters, Joanne, who was 2 years older, and Karen, who was 2 years younger. John Stanley Gacy was an auto repair machinist and World War I veteran, and Elaine was a stay-at-home mother. John Wayne Gacy's father worked hard all day and then came home every day to fix whatever was broken inside the family home. He made his own tools, and he was a stern perfectionist who was never satisfied with his work and his children, and especially his son. And he was an alcoholic who was physically abusive. He built the children a playhouse under the front porch where young John Wayne Gacy would go to be alone and just think about the world. As a child, Gacy was overweight and he wasn't the most athletic, but he wanted to do whatever he could to make his father proud of him. However, him and his dad had a very strained relationship, and he never really got the approval that he so desperately sought. He had a pretty good relationship with his sisters growing up, but other than that, his childhood really was not the best. One of Gacy's first childhood memories was of his father beating him with a leather belt. His father was working on a car, and he had taken out the parts and put them in order so that when he went to put them back together, they would be in the same order to make the whole thing easier. But 4-year-old Gacy didn't know this, and he just wanted to help his dad, so he accidentally rearranged the pieces. But his father wasn't really happy about this, and he decided that he wanted to teach him a lesson by whipping him with a leather belt. Gacy recalled another time where his father beat him over the head with a broom, which left him unconscious. This was something that wasn't uncommon for him in this household, and his father would often treat him much worse than he treated his sisters and would always call him dumb, fat, and stupid. Gacy once said that he felt that he could never be good enough for his father, but he did not hate him. In 1946, 4-year-old John Wayne Gacy was brought to a nearby prairie by a 15-year-old neighbor girl where the grasses were high and they could hide whatever they were doing. This is when the teenage girl sexually molested him. He went back to tell his mother, but during this time, his mother and father were busy having a fight about something else. In 1948, 6-year-old John Wayne Gacy stole a truck from a neighborhood store. His mother walked him back to the store so that he could return the truck and apologize to the owners. Marion had told John what happened, and of course he beat Gacy with a belt for punishment. Now, just as a side note, in the rest of this video, I'm going to be referring to John Wayne Gacy's father as John, and then John Wayne Gacy himself as Gacy. So Marion tried to shield Gacy from John's abuse, but this just ended up with Gacy's father calling him a sissy and a mama's boy. In 1949, Gacy and a neighbor boy started messing with the neighbor boy's little sister while they were all naked. Gacy's father found out about the incident and whipped him with a razor strap. This same year, a contractor friend of Gacy's father started taking taking Gacy for rides in his truck. This is when he started molesting 7-year-old John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was aware of what was going on since he had done the same thing to that little girl, but he didn't tell his father about what this man was doing to him because he was afraid that his father would just blame him. He always really hated this man, of course, and what he was doing to him, but he just felt that there was nothing he could do about it. Also in 1949, Marion and John were getting ready for a night out when Marion opened her underwear drawer only to find that it was empty. Every single pair of underpants was missing. When they found them, they were in a brown paper bag under the front porch in the playhouse that Gacy played in. This is when they found out that Gacy had been taking his mother's underwear. When they asked him why he was doing this, he said he didn't know why he was doing it, but again, John taught him a lesson, again using the razor strap. So this makes me think back to episode number 1 where we talked about early warning signs. These killers often start off with smaller sexual offenses such as stealing panties. So it was interesting to see that this is something that John Wayne Gacy had actually done. So until he was 12, there weren't any more instances of him stealing underwear, but when he was 12, they once again found him stealing underwear. This time, his mother told him that she would make him wear the underpants as punishment. But this time, she opted not to tell his father. This is when Marion just sort of stopped telling John about what Gacy was doing. She would just punish him herself and not tell John anything, but of course, John knew and continued to punish and belittle young Gacy for everything. Ever since he was born, John Wayne Gacy had a heart condition that caused him to have to avoid all sports during school. He was the average student in school. He didn't have many friends and was often bullied by his peers and other neighborhood children. He helped as a school truancy officer and volunteered to run errands for teachers and neighbors. At this point, he just seemed like he was kind of seeking approval from other adults since he wasn't getting that approval from his own father. Also growing up, Gacy found himself being terrified of random things, partially due to the beatings that he received. Things that he was never afraid of suddenly started scaring him. One example of this is fire engines. He recalled that when he was about 5, he saw a fire engine speeding by with vague images of strange men holding on to the front and back. He said there was a constant screaming that was hurting his ears, and there was this sense of it being huge and dangerous and that it was coming to get him. It got to the point where just by hearing sirens, he would run under his porch and hide. During the 4th grade, Gacy also started experiencing blackouts. He was sometimes hospitalized for seizures and these blackouts. Between the ages of 14 and 18, he spent almost a year in the hospital because of these episodes, which of course caused his grades to decline. But during this entire thing, Gacy's father accused him of faking these episodes for sympathy and attention. His mothers and sisters did believe him, but he was never actually diagnosed with any specific condition. One of Gacy's high school friends recalled several occasions where John would ridicule or beat Gacy for pretty much no reason. In 1957, this friend was at the Gacy household when John began hitting and belittling Gacy completely unprovoked. Gacy's mother tried to intervene, but the friend said that Gacy never did anything to defend himself. He just put his arms up defensively and just took the beating. By 1960, 18-year-old John Wayne Gacy became involved in politics and started working as an assistant precinct captain for the Democratic candidate in his neighborhood. Of course, John Wayne Gacy's father criticized him for this and called him a patsy. That same year, John bought Gacy a car. The title was in John Sr.'s name, but Gacy was the one that was responsible for the monthly payments. After the vehicle was paid off, then John Wayne Gacy could put his name on the title. The payments took several years to make, just as any other car, but during this time, John would often confiscate the keys so that Gacy could not drive. In 1962, Gacy had the keys taken from him, so he actually decided to go and get an extra set of keys. But of course, his father found out and he actually removed the distributor cap out of the car and did not give it back for 3 days. This was very frustrating to Gacy, so after his dad put back on the distributor cap, he left home and drove all the way to Las Vegas, where he found work with an ambulance before he was transferred to the Palm Mortuary, where he worked as a mortuary attendant. During his time working there, he slept on a cot behind the embalming room, and while he was there, he would observe the morticians embalming the dead bodies. Gacy admitted that one time when he was alone, he actually climbed into a coffin with the dead body of a teenage boy and caressed the body before experiencing a sensation of shock. After experiencing such shock, he called his mother the next day to see if his father would let him come back home. After 3 months of working with the Palm Mortuary, he went back home in Chicago to live with his family. Now, at this point, he actually hadn't finished high school, but he was able to enroll in Northwestern's Business College and graduated in 1963. I don't know how that works, but that's just what happened. After graduating, he took a management position with the Nunn Bush Shoe Company. In 1964, he was transferred to Springfield, where he worked as a salesman and was later promoted to manager of his department. In March of that year, John Wayne Gacy got engaged to a woman named Marilyn Myers, who was a woman that he worked with. The two then got married in September of 1964. Life was going pretty well for the couple, and Gacy had actually joined the local U.S. Junior Chamber, also known as the Jaycees, which is a leadership training and civic organization for people between the ages of 18 and 40. He worked extremely hard for this organization and was named key man for the organization in April of 1964. That same year, Gacy had been drinking with a colleague from the Jaycees, and this colleague invited him to spend the night on his couch. This is when him and his male colleague hooked up while they were both drunk. By 1965, Gacy was named vice president for the Springfield Jaycees and was named third most outstanding Jaycee in Illinois. Now, during this time, Marilyn's father had actually purchased 3 KFC restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa. In 1966, Marilyn's father had actually asked Gacy to manage the 3 restaurants for a salary of $15,000 per year, which is equivalent to $115,300 in today's money. In addition to the salary, he would get a share in profits earned from the KFCs. So there was pretty much no way that he could turn this down. So after completing a managerial course, Gacy and his wife moved to Waterloo, Iowa. After moving to Waterloo, Gacy joined the local chapters of the Jaycees there. He was considered highly ambitious and a hard worker by his colleagues because in addition to the 12 to 14-hour days he worked as a manager in the 3 KFCs, he worked tirelessly for the Jaycees and would go to meetings and bring free fried chicken to his associates and helped with several fundraising projects for the organization. In 1967, he was named outstanding vice president and later served on the board of directors for the Waterloo Jaycees. In February of 1966, Marilyn gave birth to the couple's first child, a son who they named Michael. In March of 1967, she gave birth once again to a daughter named Christine. Life was going great for John Wayne Gacy. He had 2 children that he described as perfect, and he even had earned his long-yearned approval from his father. In July of 1996, after they had had their first son, John visited Gacy in Iowa and apologized in him to private for his emotional and physical abuse that he had inflicted on him for so many years. He said to Gacy, "I was wrong about you." I mean, how could a father not be proud of his son at this point? His son was going out and doing so many fundraising things. He managed 3 KFCs and was making a decent amount of money, and he now had a son of his own. However, even though on the surface everything seemed picture perfect and cookie cutter, there was another side to the Waterloo Jaycees that John Wayne Gacy's family did not know about. Those involved in the Waterloo Jaycees often were involved in prostitution, pornography, and drug use. Gacy cheated on his wife several times with prostitutes and was heavily involved in drugs. He had also made it a habit to only want to socialize with the young men that Gacy employed at his KFC restaurants. restaurants. He opened up a club in his basement where he would have his male employees over for drinks and pool. He would give them alcohol and make sexual advances towards them, and if they rejected Gacy, he would just play it off as if it was some sort of joke. I mean, imagine being a young man working at a restaurant and then your boss invites you over to his house, gives you drinks, and then tries to make sexual advances towards you and just tries to play it off as a joke. This is just where the weirdness begins. It wasn't until 1967 when Gacy committed his first known sexual assault on a teenage boy. This was 15-year-old Donald Voorhees, the son of a JC colleague of his. He lured Donald to his home with the promise of showing him pornographic films. Once Donald was at the home, he gave him a bunch of alcohol and convinced him to go down on him orally. After this one instance, he did the same thing to several more young men. He would get these teens to believe that he had the job of conducting homosexual experiments for scientific research and paid each participant $50. In March of 1968, Donald Voorhees came clean to his father and told him that Gacy had sexually assaulted him. Of course, he immediately reported this to police, and Gacy was arrested and charged with oral sodomy, as well as a charge connected to the attempted assault of a 16-year-old teenage boy named Edward Lynch. Gacy denied these claims and asked to take a polygraph test, but when he did, the test just showed that he was nervous when he denied the assaults. He publicly denied the assaults and said that the charges against him were politically motivated since Donald's father, Donald Voorhees Sr., opposed Gacy's nomination for president of the Iowa Jaycees. However, many of the other Jaycees believed Gacy and supported him. Despite this, though, on May 10, 1968, Gacy was indicted for the sodomy charge. As the trial was looming in August of 1968, Gacy convinced 18-year-old Russell Schroeder, one of his employees, to physically assault Donald to try and get him not to testify at the trial. He promised him $300 if he followed through. So Russell agreed, and he decided to lure Donald into an isolated county park. He sprayed mace in his eyes, he beat him, and then shouted at him that he was not to testify against Gacy at the trial. However, Donald was able to escape. He reported the assault and immediately identified Russell as the assailant. Russell initially denied the accusation, but he later admitted to Donald that he only did this because Gacy told him to. Gacy was then charged for hiring Russell for the assault. On September 12th, Gacy underwent a psychiatric evaluation at the Psychiatric Hospital of the State University of Iowa. 2 doctors, and 17 days later, they determined that Gacy had antisocial personality disorder and decided that he was unlikely to benefit from any therapy or treatment, and that his behaviors were likely to bring him to repeated conflict with society. They also decided that he was in fact mentally competent to stand trial. At the trial, Gacy entered a guilty plea to 1 count of sodomy in relation to Donald Voorhees. He told the judge that yes, the two had engaged in a sexual relationship, but that he acted out of curiosity. But still, he was convicted of sodomy on December 3rd, 1968, and was sentenced to 10 years. The same day, Marilyn filed for divorce and requested possession of the home, all of their property, and sole custody of their children, as well as alimony payments. The court ruled in her favor, and the divorce was finalized on September 18th, 1969. Gacy never saw his wife and children ever again after this. Now, of course, while Gacy was incarcerated, he was the model prisoner. He was head cook. He joined the inmate JC chapter and supervised many projects to improve the conditions for inmates in the prison. He applied for early release for the first time in June of 1969 and was denied. He then went on to complete 16 high school courses and earn his diploma in November of 1969. On Christmas Day in 1969, Gacy's father died from liver failure, and Gacy didn't find out until 2 days later. After finding out the news, Gacy collapsed on the floor and started sobbing uncontrollably. He requested a supervised leave from the prison to attend his father's funeral in Chicago, but he was denied. On June 18th, 1970, after serving 18 months of his 10-year prison sentence, Gacy was granted parole with 12 months probation under the conditions that he would move back home with his mother in Chicago, that he would follow a curfew of 10 p.m., with the Iowa Board of Parole receiving regular updates on his progress. After being released, a JC associate named Clarence Lane picked him up from prison. He then relocated back to Chicago to live with his mother on June 19th and started to work as a short order cook. And this is where the many missteps in the justice system started. On February 12th, 1971, Gacy was charged yet again with the sexual assault of a teenage boy after the boy said that he was lured to Gacy into his car at the Greyhound bus terminal. Gacy drove this boy to his home and tried to force himself on the boy. However, this charge was dismissed after the boy failed to appear in court. I wonder why he didn't show up. Now, the Iowa Board of Parole didn't know about this incident, so when his parole ended 8 months later, his records were sealed and nothing ever came of this. With the help of his mother, Gacy purchased a home at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue in Norwood Park Township in Cook County. After moving into this home with his mother in August of 1971, Gacy became engaged to a woman named Carol Hoff. Carol Hoff had also been previously divorced and she had 2 children of her own. Shortly after they were engaged, she moved into the home and his mother moved out of the home shortly after that. On June 22nd, 1972, Gacy was arrested once again on charges of aggravated battery of another young boy named Jackie D. Jackie D told police that Gacy was impersonating an officer, that he showed him a sheriff's badge and lured him into his car and then forced him to go down on him orally. However, these charges were also dropped after Jackie had apparently tried to blackmail Gacy into paying him money to drop the charges. A week later, John Wayne Gacy and Carol Hoff were married on July 1st, 1972. Gacy shared his home on Somerdale Avenue with his new wife and 2 stepdaughters. He quit his job as a short order cook and started his own construction business called Painting, Decorating, and Maintenance Contractors, or PDM Contractors. This business originally did minor repair work such as pouring concrete and redecorating, but they eventually expanded to include remodeling, interior design, and landscaping. This business just kept expanding and it was building its success. In 1973, Gacy and a teenage employee of PDM Contractors traveled to Florida to visit a property that Gacy had purchased. The first night of being in Florida, Gacy sexually abused the young boy in their hotel room that they shared. Of course, right after this, the boy refused to stay in the hotel room anymore with Gacy, and he actually started sleeping on the beach. When they got back to Chicago, this employee went over to Gacy's house while Gacy was in his front yard and started beating him. Gacy's mother-in-law intervened, so this employee just drove away. Of course, Gacy's wife and family were like, what is going on? So Gacy told his wife that this employee was beating him because he didn't want to pay him because of this worker's low quality work. While living in the family home, Gacy's neighbors knew him as being kind, generous, and helpful. He was active in the community and politics. He volunteered, and in 1975, he was appointed director of Chicago's annual Polish Constitution Day Parade. He supervised this event every year from 1975 to 1978. Through his work, he actually got to meet First Lady Rosalind Carter on May 6, 1978. In 1975, he had also become a part of a club called the Jolly Joker Clown Club, where members would perform at fundraising events and visit children in the hospital. He created his own characters like Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown. He designed his own costumes and makeup and went to these volunteering and fundraising events. So basically, this is where the whole killer clown thing came in. A lot of people around him at the time when he was doing this whole clown thing described him as looking more scary than funny. He kind of made his clown look creepy rather than child-friendly and cute. So he didn't necessarily dress up as a clown and go kill people, which is what a lot of people think he did. It was more so just that he was a part of this club while going around killing people using a completely different ruse that we will get into later. Also in this year, Gacy admitted to his wife that he was bisexual. After the couple had sex on Mother's Day of that year, he told his wife that that was the last time that they would ever have sex, and he started spending most evenings away from home, returning in the early hours of the mornings, saying that he was working late. Now, while all of this was going on, while he was working, doing all of these volunteer things, making himself look like this great community guy, John Wayne Gacy had a secret life behind the scenes that wouldn't be uncovered until years later. So that was basically the history, childhood, and adult life of John Wayne Gacy. So that is where I'm going to end part 1. Tomorrow we will do part 2, and we will go into more of what actually made John Wayne Gacy the elusive serial killer that we know him as today. So that is it for today's video. If you guys like this video, please make sure to leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. If you are liking this series so far, make sure to turn on your notifications so you do not miss tomorrow's episode, which is John Wayne Gacy Part 2. Make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Both will be linked in the description box below. With that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow for Part 2 in episode number 6 in our Psychology of a Killer series. Bye!